Hi everyone, my name is Siddharth, and our topic for the second assignment is challenges in IT outsourcing. So we are a group of four, and Meghna is doing the introduction, followed by reasons for outsourcing IT services and companies that outsource, which will be presented by me. Then we've got challenges of IT outsourcing. So Bhavan's doing improper vendor management, Meghna is doing communication challenges, and Rishikesh is doing scope, time, and cost, which is the triple constraint. Then we've got a case study which will be explained by Bhavan, followed by a questionnaire and a conclusion of the topic.
Companies outsource their products or services to vendors to overcome the limitations within their company or gain benefit from other companies. In IT outsourcing, the challenges are often experienced by the clients and vendors, besides the development of different processes and tools to overcome the risk or the challenges. These challenges might occur from both the client side or the vendor side and affect in developing the best quality of product. This video helps in understanding the challenges of IT outsourcing in the real world. We as a team have discussed these challenges with the help of a case study and a questionnaire regarding outsourcing problems in the real world. As I said, the project fails due to these challenges, and these challenges also affect the growth of the project.
Why do companies outsource? So one of the main reasons for companies to outsource their IT services is to cut down costs. These can include labor costs as well as indirect costs. The cost of labor in developed countries is 10 to 15 times more than in developing countries. So suppose you employ a person in Australia, it'll cost you around 50 to 60 grand a year, but then you can employ around 10 people in the same cost in countries like China or India. So labor costs. And indirect costs refer to costs of renting an office, then renting or buying office furniture, electricity, and maintenance. Other reasons to outsource can include improving the quality of IT services and concentrating on core business activities rather than focusing on IT services. So what does improving quality of IT services exactly mean? If a company outsources its IT services to a third-party vendor that specializes in a specific activity, that activity can be achieved more efficiently and effectively by the third-party vendor rather than the parent company. So as the third-party vendors are specialists, they also have access to precise equipments and technical expertise, and most of the times this is better than the parent company. Thus the activities can be completed at a faster rate and with higher quality output. Improved quality of IT services contributes to improved efficiency and effectiveness in a company. So that's one reason why companies outsource. And the other one is focusing on core business. So outsourcing enables companies to focus on their core business and expertise. If a company decides to invest in a different line of business and focuses too much on it, there are chances that it could potentially lose focus of its core business. A simple example of this can be a grocery store. So suppose the grocery store is planning to add a florist to their operation. So if too much focus is put on the florist operations, there is a high possibility that they lose focus of the core business, which is grocery. So the other reason to outsource is to focus on our IT services. This is a list of major companies that outsource their IT services. This list has been taken from the internet as well as from my current and previous experience. Starting with Combank. Combank outsources part of its IT services to HCL. Then Telstra. Telstra outsources its IT services to Infosys. And then we've got Suncorp Group. So Suncorp has ThoughtWorks as a huge partner and outsources their IT services to ThoughtWorks as well as Wipro. Now, Credit Suisse and Lloyds Banking Group are places where I worked before, and they outsource their IT services such as software testing and software development to Cognizant Technology Solutions. Now we've got challenges of outsourcing, which will be explained by Bhavan, Meghna, and Rishikesh.
One of the basic challenges and risks in IT outsourcing is improper vendor management. The primary purpose of proper vendor management is to ensure that the client company receives the quality of service promised in the contract and achieves its returns on investment goals through appropriate communication with the vendor, thus eluding time delays and budget overruns. An efficient vendor management strategy is mandatory for each organization. Every organization which indulges in outsourcing needs a vendor management strategy which serves as a directive as to how the external vendors need to be handled and monitored, and how various issues with them need to be resolved. The scale and formality of these strategies are directly proportional to the organization's size. Taylor suggests that there are some kind of dangers for clients emerging from the challenges in controlling the vendor and overseeing the working connections amongst the vendor and the client. There are a lot of risk factors affecting the vendor client relationship. There are external factors and there are internal factors. The external factors like geopolitical conditions, demographic conditions, and socioeconomic conditions directly or indirectly affect the IT outsourcing organizations and the project. These conditions are far from being in control of either the company or the vendor, and hence they prove to be very high risk factors to consider while IT outsourcing. There are internal factors and individual factors of the clients like trust, organization culture, varying work ethics, and conflict of interests. Trust plays an important role between the two parties as it leads to privacy and security concerns. The company cultures are usually different and often affect the work ethics, which may be conflicting for the respective companies and thus affecting the relationship between them. The conflict of interest and intentions can be considered as one of the biggest factors affecting a collaboration between two organizations. For example, the vendor may provide the client company with a solution it may not require at all, or pack their secondary software with their client company's primary software, which the client company may already have, thus just increasing the time and budget of the whole collaboration. The geopolitical factors are not in control of either of the organizations. If you're considering external factors, the only thing that can help to mitigate them is a proper risk management strategy. Let's come back to some internal factors to consider. Ineffective communication. Now, communication between the vendor and the client counterparts, if it's ineffective, usually leads to confusion and misunderstandings. This is much more prone to offshore outsourcing cases rather than onshore outsourcing cases. If the communication between the counterparts is not proper, it's going to lead to project critical risks and it's going to lead to project being a failure. Let's also consider another factor, improper drafting and understanding of contract and SLAs. This is another big risk in outsourcing affecting the vendor-client relationship. Frequent scope changes or non-abiding vendor may create disputes. Like if the response time to client's complaint is 48 hours and it has been clearly stated in the SLA, which is the service level agreement, what if the vendor fails to respond? It may result in loss for the client's company, also a loss for trust and credibility between the two organizations. In the past, this has led to a lot of scenarios in which the vendor has been dragged to court and the project resulted in a failure.
Many challenges can be experienced due to the issue in communication. Communication is considered as an important factor in IT outsourcing. Due to the lack of communication channels, the loss of information can be experienced. Hence, this could affect the project development. The clients and vendors sometimes might be involved in IT offshore outsourcing, where languages and culture would be completely different. The collaboration of large projects could be difficult due to the lack of communication. The main reasons that imposes impact on communication are different time zones, languages, communication channels, and so on. Due to the difference in time zone, the communication breakdown and understanding of the information could sometimes be impossible. Also, due to the difference in time zone, both parties could be uncomfortable dialing or calling for the information at inappropriate time in a day. The lack of honesty or sharing any risky information with the clients by the vendors could also lead to an communication issue in IT outsourcing. Many factors in the communication might lead to the miscommunication or misinterpretation of the information by the vendors or between the vendors and clients. Few of the factors are base language challenges, accent and clarity, grammar and vocabulary, and non-verbal communication. Base language challenges. The lack of cultural awareness and intercultural skills imposes as a constraint in successful communication between clients and vendors. This can be mostly experienced during offshore outsourcing due to the cultural difference and the language difference. Accent and clarity. The first language influence on English in outsourcing environment could lead to the misinterpretation of words and could lead to the communication challenge in vendor environment. Grammar and vocabulary. If the vendors are from non-English speaking countries, they might experience accent and clarity issues or the grammar and vocabulary issues as well. The grammar and vocabulary would be the biggest challenge during the communication with the clients. The vendors sometimes could not be able to understand the client's communication due to the grammar or pronunciation differences. And lastly, the non-verbal communication. Sometimes due to the distance between the vendors and clients, non-verbal communication such as facial expression and body language could lead to the misunderstanding of information between clients and vendors.
At the point when the outsourcing venture has high possibility, if the associations is inadequate in one or more of the required elements, the outsourcing turns into a sensible road to seek after. Any organizations have three constraints on the outsourcing project. They are scope, which is the amount of work get done for a given cost over given time. The next comes the time. That's the actual time required to produce a deliverable would be at the end result of the project as well. And at the last is the cost. It is estimated amount of money required to complete the project. The triple constraints fundamentally shows in pictorial design. The key characteristics that must be taken care of adequate for effective fulfillment and conclusion of any task. For thoroughness quality, the key priorities of the triple constraints are itemized as follows. The three constraints are often used to measure the performance of the project. Not only that, it also gives the end result of the project, whether the project was successful or not. Triple constraints trade-off. The highlighted feature is change in any constraint will affect the other constraints also. Lesser the time, higher cost, narrowed scope. Reduced cost, more time, narrowed scope. Increased scope, more time, high cost. The priority of which to be changed is usually decided by the outsourcing organizations. Huge number of the outsourced venture discover disappointment because to meet the prerequisite of these three constraints. So let us know about the instances in all these three constraints. In terms of scope, the first instance is when the client is giving you tough time in UAT, signing off and demanding for huge changes for the system. The second instance is when the client is asked for the additional feature which is not present in the agreed scope without heading to change control procedures. The third instance is when the client's demand for the changes which was agreed initially. Amid such circumstances, the cost and the time may not be redesigned fittingly, and which promotes disappointment or failure of the outsourced project. Now, let us go in terms of time. When the outsourced project is behind the scheduled time and a proper step to be taken in order to keep it back on track. The second instance is in some other situations the project will be on the right schedule, but the clients may request to complete the project before the scheduled time to meet some of their business objectives, which will promote the outsourced project disappointment. Finally, in terms of cost, the first instance is that at the point when budget allowance goes more than anticipated and attempting to get back it on the privileged planned budget arrangements. The second instance, during certain circumstances like the outsourced project will be well inside the arranged budget plan, however the customer's allocation to finish it with lesser cost to have benefit from the pronounced project, which results in the low productivity and also the low quality, which eventually ends in the project failure. So these are some of the portions of challenges of outsourced project in light of these three constraints. The outsourcing structure ought to experience three constraints analysis to help association in the plan of a visible outsourcing choice, and that ought to be considered if a viable outsourcing choice is to be detailed.
Let us consider a case study to understand the challenges with IT outsourcing further. It is called the Bezeq AMS Billing System case study. Bezeq is a large telecom communications company which was based in Israel, and AMS a global software solution company which was supposed to develop a billing system for Bezeq, and the whole project had a fixed cost of $100 million. But due to some unprecedented circumstances like trust issues in the initial planning and scope meetings, which were not resolved, and the general design document which was not accepted by the client company, saying that the major customizations were not included, it led to a lot of disputes between the two organizations. When the general design document was submitted, it was rejected by Bezeq, saying that major customizations were not included, and in turn, AMS had to ask for increase in budget and time because the scope was increased, which was granted. But the final nail in the coffin was hit when AMS asked for 1,000 days of extension, which concluded with a long drawn court and out of court battle with AMS paying back all the amount it got from Bezeq. AMS paid $23.5 million to Bezeq, but still Bezeq incurred a direct loss of $20 million, apart from the fact that the whole project was a failure and they wasted 3 years on a failed project, which also gave their counterparts an opportunity to gain the market share. From the above case study, we observe that there were a few problems which resulted in the fallout. The main reasons being that both the parties had trust issues because of the lack of any prior long-term arrangement between them. Also, one of the primary reasons being the fixed amount of contract, which resulted in the project being inflexible and created problems for the vendor at first and then for the client company. In this case, the client company rejected the general design, stating that it did not have the original customization which was specified during the scoping phase. It should have constantly been monitored And it should also have monitored the vendor's design, should have frequent meetings with them, which could have helped them to avoid this problem, which eventually led to the project being scrapped. So that highlights the lack of communication part and monitoring part. There were also some external factors affecting the project directly. External factors like geopolitical conditions. The political conditions in the Middle East were not great at that time when the project was outsourced. Since the company was based in Israel, it had direct effects on both the organizations and the project as such. There was also a lot of difference between the organization's culture and work ethics, and there was also no framework designed to manage the vendors and designed to avoid all these risks and challenges.
To understand the challenges of IT outsourcing in the real world and in the IT industry, we prepared a questionnaire and interviewed a project manager. This guy works in one of Australia's largest insurance providers. The responses we received from the questionnaire were really useful and helpful and enabled all the team members to understand the real world outsourcing challenges in the IT industry. So this is a list of questions we asked the project manager. Some of the responses which we received were quite interesting and informative. For example, question number 3, who takes the decision to outsource? Now we as a team had an idea that the CEO or the CIO must be taking the decision to selecting an outsourcing company. But then from our discussion with the project manager, it was quite clear that it is a multi-level decision. So the CEO and the CIO and even the general manager are involved and are responsible for selecting the vendor. But then the project manager or the delivery manager also play a role in the decision to outsource. So depending on the budget which they receive, the delivery manager or the project manager decide how many people they want onshore and how many people they want offshore. So to sum it up, it's a multi-level decision. Another interesting fact or another interesting information we received was through the response we got for question number 4, which is what happens once a vendor is selected. So we had an idea that there might be some agreement on costs or something, but then we had no idea about APRA. Now APRA is a prudential regulator of the Australian financial services industry. It stands for Australian Prudential Regulation Authority. The project manager told us that without an APRA approval, it is impossible for Australian financial institutions to outsource outside Australia. And this whole process takes about 6 months. So this is something which happens once the vendor is selected and sometimes can also be a challenge. These are some more questions we asked the project manager. Out of these, one is really interesting. Question number 8, which says, what do you do to overcome these challenges or any challenges faced when outsourcing? So the project manager told us that there's a fortnightly health check which he implemented when he joined the organization. The fortnightly health check was a matrix to track the health via categories of relationship. Red, amber or green ratings were given to the categories, and any category which matched amber or red was discussed and an action was agreed upon. So factors such as thought leadership, flex, capability uplift, capability skill set, delivery, communication and technical leadership were discussed in this health checkup. And this checklist was implemented last year and he still goes through it every fortnight to see how his outsourcing is going.
The challenges and the risks associated with outsourcing start propping up as soon as the client organizations decide to outsource the project. From drafting the contract to enforcing it via SLAs, outsourcing, though usually profitable, comes along with a few critical risks and demerits, which puts not only the project success but also the company's success at stake. We as a team have concentrated on the challenges of outsourcing. We have done our best to figure out how we can overcome these challenges by preparing the questionnaires and conducting interviews, studying a case study, and something along these lines. Thank you. These are some of the references.